Ethan Miller crouched behind the shattered wall, his breathing loud in the silence of the ruined outpost. Smoke curled from the burning remains of what had once been a supply depot. The air smelled of dust, metal, and something acrid he could not name. The battle had ended, or at least it seemed to have ended. But Ethan knew better. Silence in war zones rarely meant safety. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and peered over the rubble. Around him, the remnants of his squad were gathering. A few groaned in pain, some tried to check their gear, and one or two just stared blankly into the distance. They had lost a lot of good men today, and now they were far from home, on a planet that had no mercy and no friends. Then he saw her. She was trapped under a large piece of twisted metal, her body bent at an awkward angle. Her armor was cracked, and small sparks flickered from her left shoulder. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He had never seen anyone like her before. Her skin was pale, green, smooth, and strong-looking. But her eyes, they were different. Deep, dark, and alert. Scanning the scene with a mixture of fear and pain. "Ethan," called out a voice behind him. He turned to see one of his teammates, a young man named Caleb, pointing toward the alien. "She's alive. But she's trapped." Ethan did not answer immediately. He did not hesitate. He ran toward her. His boots crunched over broken concrete and scorched metal. Every step reminded him of the danger. But something inside him pushed him forward. This being, whoever she was, needed help. The debris pressed heavily on her body. Ethan crouched next to her and assessed the situation. "Hold still," he said. "I'm going to get you out of there." Her eyes widened, but she did not move. There was no trust in them, only wariness. Ethan noticed the tension in her body and the slight shaking in her hands. He reached under the metal, testing its weight, and then called out, "Caleb, get me a lever or something strong. We need to lift this together." Caleb hurried back with a metal rod. Together, they managed to lift the heavy debris. The alien let out a quiet sound, almost like a hiss, when the pressure on her legs eased. Ethan helped her sit up slowly. "You're okay," he said softly. "You're safe now." She blinked at him, not saying anything. She had no words he could understand, but he could see the mix of confusion and suspicion in her expression. Ethan gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Don't be afraid," he whispered. She tilted her head slightly, as if trying to read him. Ethan understood the gesture. He had seen it before in animals and humans alike. A cautious curiosity. The first spark of trust. He reached into his pack and pulled out a water container. "Here. Drink this. You need it." She hesitated. Ethan held the container steadily, meeting her gaze. Slowly, she leaned forward and took a sip. Her hands were trembling, but she did not pull away. "Good," Ethan said quietly. "That's good. You're doing fine." Caleb shifted nervously beside him. "Ethan, what are we doing with her?" She's one of them." Ethan shook his head. "That doesn't matter right now. She's hurt, and we can help her. That's what matters. We're not monsters." The alien finally spoke, her voice low and strange, almost musical. Ethan could not understand the words, but he felt the tension in them. She was scared. That was enough for him. He helped her to her feet slowly. "We need to move," he said. "There may be more of them nearby. Stay close to me." She looked at him sharply, as if weighing his words. Then she nodded slightly and followed him. Ethan noticed her movements were careful, almost precise, like every step was calculated. She was strong, he could tell, but she had been trained to fight, not to rely on anyone else. The rest of the squad formed a loose protective circle around them as they moved. Ethan kept glancing at her. Every so often, she would glance back, her eyes tracking him. He felt a strange connection forming. something he could not name. Perhaps it was just relief that she was alive. Or perhaps it was the recognition that even in this hostile world, they could count on each other. Night began to fall. The alien sky was darker than anything on Earth, and the stars were strange, distant points of light. Ethan found a small shelter in the ruins, a collapsed building that still had some walls standing. He set her down gently. "You should rest," he said. She looked at him again, her eyes wide and unreadable. She did not speak. Ethan understood that, for her, trust was earned slowly, and he was willing to wait. He checked the perimeter, scanning for movement. Nothing. For now, they were safe. He returned to her side and offered her a small ration bar. She took it cautiously, her hands shaking slightly. Ethan smiled at her. "You'll get stronger soon," he said. "We'll get you out of here, and then we'll figure out the rest." She tilted her head again, studying him. Ethan wondered what thoughts ran through her mind. Did she trust him? Did she hate humans? Did she even care about being rescued? He did not know. But he was determined to try. Hours passed. Ethan kept watch, while the others slept or tended to their own wounds. Occasionally, he would glance at her, sitting quietly and alert. She did not speak, did not move much, but he felt a presence, a silent acknowledgement that he was there and that she noticed. When the first light of the alien dawn broke through the shattered walls, Ethan woke the squad. "Time to move," he said. "We can't stay here." The alien stood, stretching carefully. Ethan offered her his arm. She looked at it for a long moment before taking it. Together, they stepped out into the ruined landscape. The human soldier and the alien warrior, each relying on the other in ways neither of them had expected. As they walked, Ethan spoke softly. "My name is Ethan. What's yours?" She paused. Then she whispered something that sounded like a name. Strange and flowing. Ethan nodded. "Good. I'll remember that." She did not speak again, but she walked a little closer to him, her steps more confident. Ethan knew the journey ahead would be dangerous, but he also knew one thing: he would not leave her behind. Not now, not ever. Together, they disappeared into the shadows of the ruined planet, two soldiers from different worlds, bound by circumstance and the beginning of a trust neither of them fully understood yet. The morning light filtered through the broken walls of the ruined city, casting long shadows on the cracked ground. Ethan Miller led the small group carefully, his senses alert. Every sound, every flicker of movement, made him pause. The planet was quiet, too quiet, and that always meant danger. Beside him, the alien warrior Leora, as she had finally allowed him to call her, moved cautiously. Her steps were precise, silent, and confident, but there was still a stiffness in her movements. She was learning to trust him, though she would never admit it. "Ethan," Caleb whispered, pointing toward a collapsed building ahead. "Looks like more of them. Maybe a patrol." Ethan nodded and lowered his voice. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes scanning the building, then followed. Ethan could feel her tension. It was understandable. Her kind had trained her to survive, to fight alone. And now, she had to rely on humans on him. He wished he could make it easier. But this world did not forgive weakness. As they crept past the building, a sudden noise made them all freeze. A small creature, like a cross between a lizard and a dog, darted from the rubble and disappeared into the shadows. Everyone exhaled slowly. Leora tilted her head, studying the humans with an unreadable expression. Ethan smiled faintly. "See? Not everything wants to kill us," he said softly. They moved on, careful and silent, through streets filled with shattered walls and broken vehicles. Ethan glanced at Leora from time to time. She was studying him as much as he was studying her. There was a curiosity in her eyes, small but persistent, as if she were trying to understand him. "You don't like war," she said suddenly, her voice low and musical, though her words were broken. Ethan froze. She had spoken in a language he did not fully understand, but the tone was clear. He nodded slowly. "No," he said. "I fight when I have to protect people. I don't like it either." She looked at him, and for a moment, he thought she might say something else. But then she only nodded once and turned her attention back to the path ahead. Hours passed, and the squad moved through the city, avoiding patrols and debris. Leora stayed close to Ethan, occasionally helping him check corners or scan rooftops. She was skilled, far more skilled than any human, but Ethan noticed the way she hesitated when making decisions. She was not used to working with a team. During a brief rest, Ethan offered her some food from his pack. She took it cautiously, studying him as if trying to understand why he offered help instead of attacking her. Ethan smiled gently. "You have to eat," he said. "You can't fight if you're weak." She paused, then accepted the food. The movement was slow, careful, but it was a step. Ethan knew trust was built in small pieces, and this was one of them. That night, they found shelter in an abandoned building. Ethan set up a small perimeter with the rest of the squad, while Leora examined the walls and corners. She moved silently, like a shadow, her green skin blending with the darkness. Ethan watched her and felt a strange sense of awe. She was powerful, but she was also cautious, like a wild animal learning to rely on someone else. "Ethan," she said softly, breaking the silence. "You trust me?" Ethan considered her question. He wanted to answer honestly. "Yes," he said finally. "I trust you to watch my back, just like I watch yours. That's all we can do right now." She did not speak again, but she nodded slightly and moved closer to him as the others settled down for the night. Ethan kept his hand near his weapon, but he did not feel threatened. For the first time, he felt a small sense of peace. The next morning, the group faced a real test. A patrol of alien soldiers appeared in the distance, moving quickly through the rubble. Ethan signaled to the squad, and they all dropped behind cover. Leora's eyes narrowed, and Ethan saw her tense, ready to fight. He whispered, "Stay close. Follow my lead." The patrol moved closer, unaware of the humans hiding nearby. Ethan watched them carefully. He noticed their formation, their patterns. Leora mirrored his movements, her body tight, ready to strike. Together, they made a silent team. Their actions coordinated without words. When the patrol reached the edge of the street, Ethan made a signal. Leora moved swiftly, silently disabling the closest soldier with a precise strike. The others were distracted, and Ethan's squad moved in, taking the patrol by surprise. The fight was brief, efficient, and over before it had fully begun. Afterward, Leora stood, breathing heavily, and looked at Ethan. Her eyes were bright, almost amazed. He offered her a small nod. "Good work," he said. "You're getting better with us." She tilted her head, a small sound of acknowledgement leaving her lips. It was not a smile, but it was something like it. Ethan felt a small warmth in his chest. As they continued their journey, Leora began mimicking small human gestures. She handed Ethan items without being asked. She watched his movements, and she even attempted a small, awkward smile. Ethan encouraged her gently. "See? You can do it," he said. "You don't have to be alone." The alien warrior seemed to consider this. There was a hesitation in her steps, but also a new confidence. Ethan realized that humans had something her kind often lacked: patience, kindness, and the willingness to help even when there was no immediate benefit. Later, when they set up camp for the night, Leora surprised everyone. She took the initiative to scout the perimeter, moving quietly and efficiently. When she returned, Ethan nodded at her. "Good work," he said. "I could get used to having you watch my back." For a moment, she paused and looked at him directly. There was a faint expression on her face, something like curiosity mixed with respect. Ethan smiled softly, understanding the significance. That night, around the small fire they had managed to make, Ethan spoke quietly to Leora. "I know it's strange for you, being with humans. You're used to fighting alone, trusting no one. But we're not all bad. Some of us care about others, even if they're different, even if they're not human." Leora listened, her eyes fixed on the flickering flames. She did not respond with words, but she leaned slightly closer to him. Ethan felt a small sense of connection. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. The following days were a mixture of careful movement, brief skirmishes, and quiet moments of rest. Ethan taught Leora small things: how to predict the movements of human soldiers, how to anticipate traps, and how to move silently among debris. In return, Leora taught them some of her combat techniques, her speed and agility making her a valuable ally. Ethan noticed that she began to look at him differently. Not with suspicion, but with awareness. Small gestures, like tilting her head when he spoke, or following his lead without hesitation, showed that she was starting to trust him. One evening, while the squad was moving through a narrow alley, Leora paused. She pointed to a set of tracks in the dust. Ethan knelt to examine them. They were fresh, probably from another patrol. "Good eye," he said. "If we follow these carefully, we can avoid a fight." She gave a slight nod. Ethan smiled faintly. For the first time, Leora allowed a small smile to cross her face. It was fleeting, but it was real. Even in this war-torn world, even among rubble and danger, there was a spark of hope. As they settled in for the night, Ethan looked at her quietly. "I'll make sure of that." She stared at him for a long moment, then looked away. She did not respond with words, but Ethan did not mind. Sometimes, actions spoke louder than words, and he knew that slowly, bit by bit, she was learning the same. In the darkness of the ruined city, under the alien stars, a bond was forming. Not with grand declarations or dramatic speeches, but through shared survival, quiet gestures, and mutual respect. Ethan knew that the journey ahead would be dangerous, but he also knew that they were stronger together than apart. And for the first time, Leora did not seem entirely alone. The sun rose slowly over the jagged horizon of the alien planet, casting long, strange shadows across the ruins. Ethan Miller rubbed his eyes and took a deep breath of the dry, metallic air. The night had been quiet, but quiet never lasted long here. He could feel the tension in the air, and he knew the squad would need to stay alert. Leora was already moving, her steps precise as she checked the perimeter. She paused and glanced back at Ethan, her green eyes catching the pale light. He gave her a small nod, and she returned to her inspection. There was a rhythm to her movements, a silent communication that had grown between them over the past few days. They did not need words for everything anymore. "Ethan," Caleb whispered, nudging him as they prepared to move. "What do you think she's thinking? About us, I mean. She's still different." Ethan shook his head. "She's cautious. That's all. You would be too if you'd been trained to fight alone your whole life. Just give her time. She's learning to trust." Slowly. The group moved carefully through a narrow canyon, the walls rising high on either side. Ethan kept an eye on Leora. She walked a few steps behind him, scanning every corner, listening to every sound. Her posture was tense, her muscles ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Yet, there was something different now, a small easing in her steps. A quiet acceptance that she was not completely alone. As they reached a small open area, the squad paused. The ground was littered with the remains of an old alien settlement. Broken buildings, twisted metal, and scorched earth marked the place. Ethan motioned for the others to rest for a moment. He knelt beside a cracked wall and pulled out some rations. Leora stood nearby, watching him carefully. Ethan tore a piece of food and held it out. "Here. Eat. You need energy." She hesitated, then took it. As she chewed slowly, her eyes never left his. There was a strange intensity in her gaze, something that spoke of a past filled with hardship and battles. Ethan felt a pang of curiosity. He wanted to know her story, but he knew it would take time for her to share it. "Leora," he said gently, "you can tell me anything. I won't judge. I just want to help." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she lowered her gaze and spoke in a quiet voice, her words halting but clear enough for him to understand a few. "I, alone, trained, fight, trust, few." Ethan nodded, piecing together the fragments. She had been alone, trained to fight from a young age, and learned to trust very few. "I understand," he said softly. "You didn't have anyone to rely on, but now, you do, at least a little." Her eyes flicked up to his, searching. There was a moment of silence, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Then she looked away, focusing on the ruined ground. Ethan could feel her walls slowly beginning to crumble. The squad moved on, deeper into the ruins. Ethan and Leora walked side by side, their steps synchronized. It was not just survival anymore. It was cooperation, a silent partnership forming in the midst of chaos. Later, as they reached a small building that had once been a communication hub, Ethan suggested they take shelter for the day. The walls were cracked, and the roof was partially collapsed, but it offered some protection from the harsh sunlight. Inside, Leora examined the walls and corners with precision. Ethan watched her, impressed by her skills. "You've learned quickly," he said. "I didn't expect you to adapt so fast." She tilted her head, a small gesture that seemed almost like a question. "Adapt. Necessary. Survive," she replied. Ethan nodded. "Yes. But you're also learning to trust. That's harder than surviving alone sometimes." Her gaze softened for a brief moment, and Ethan felt a spark of connection. He reached over and gently adjusted a piece of armor that had shifted on her shoulder. She flinched slightly at first, then allowed him to fix it. "You're careful," she said, her voice quieter now. Ethan smiled faintly. "I don't want to hurt you." They spent the afternoon quietly repairing her damaged gear. Each movement was slow and deliberate. Ethan could see her starting to relax, to let him help. It was a small victory, but an important one. Trust was not given freely, and she was beginning to give it to him, piece by piece. As evening fell, the group prepared for the night. Ethan kept watch while the others settled down. Leora sat nearby, silent but alert. Ethan approached her carefully. "You're stronger than you realize," he said softly. "Not just in combat, but here," he gestured to the area around them. "With people. You're learning to work with others, to trust. That's not easy." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the dim firelight. "I never had," she said, struggling with the words. "Never. Kindness. Like this." Ethan felt a deep sense of empathy. He understood loneliness, the feeling of being abandoned, and having to rely only on oneself. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to be alone anymore. Not with us. Not with me." Her eyes widened slightly, and for the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of emotion that went beyond caution or survival instinct. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A spark of something new, something fragile and tentative. The night passed quietly, and by morning, the bond between them had grown stronger. Leora was no longer just a warrior to Ethan. She was a companion, a partner, and she was beginning to see him as more than just a human soldier. As they moved through the ruins, they encountered more signs of the alien war, abandoned weapons, scorch marks, and the occasional patrol that they carefully avoided. Each challenge brought them closer together. Leora began to anticipate Ethan's movements, and he began to understand her instincts. During a brief rest, Ethan noticed Leora staring at a distant hill. He followed her gaze and saw the remains of a village, burned and empty. He could feel the weight of the past in her gaze. "You remember?" he asked quietly. She nodded, her eyes distant. "All alone, trained, fight, lost." Her voice trailed off, filled with pain and memory. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "It's over now. You're not alone anymore. You can leave that behind. At least a little." And she looked at him, her eyes searching for truth in his words. For the first time, Leora allowed herself to feel a small sense of relief. The fear and mistrust that had been with her for so long began to ease, replaced by a fragile hope. The squad continued their journey, moving cautiously but with growing confidence. Ethan and Leora worked seamlessly together, their trust in each other becoming a silent strength. Every small victory, every shared moment, reinforced the bond that was forming between them. By evening, they reached a partially destroyed bridge. Ethan signaled for the group to stop. He surveyed the area carefully. The bridge was unstable, but it was the only way forward. Leora stepped forward, testing the surface. "Safe, if careful," she said, her voice confident. Ethan nodded. "Good, lead the way." Together, they crossed the bridge, careful with every step. The others followed, trusting in Leora's judgment and Ethan's guidance. When they reached the other side safely, Ethan gave her a small smile. "You did well," he said. "I knew I could trust you." She looked at him, a small smile forming on her lips. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. Trust was a gift, and she had given it to him. Even if only a little. It was enough for now. That night, as they camped under the alien sky, Ethan spoke softly to her. "You're not alone. Not anymore. And you don't have to be afraid. We'll face whatever comes next, together." She looked at him, her expression softer than before. There was no fear now, only cautious acceptance. Ethan knew that the journey ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, they would face it together. And for Leora, the long years of isolation and training began to feel a little less heavy. She was no longer completely alone. She had someone who cared, someone she could trust, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel it.